You're listening to The Visibility Advantage, the podcast for senior leaders and business owners who want to build strategic presence in a world being reshaped by AI. I'm your host, Lynette Johnston, a LinkedIn and AI visibility specialist and author. I'm here to help you become as visible as you are valuable. Let's get into it. LinkedIn is changing, but it's not always clear what those changes add up to or where the platform is heading. Organic reach has fallen. Paid visibility is becoming more prominent. AI is influencing what we see, what we create, and how expertise is discovered beyond LinkedIn itself. Meanwhile, professionals and businesses are trying to work out which activities still matter and where their time is best spent. To explore what's happening, I'm joined by John Espirian, a LinkedIn specialist, author of Content DNA, fearless leader of the Espresso Plus community, and the relentlessly helpful voice behind the excellent Informed podcast. John and I have both worked with LinkedIn for many years. We've seen features arrive and disappear, publishing opportunities expand and contract, and the platform become simultaneously more important and more difficult to navigate. In this conversation, we look beyond individual features to consider the bigger shifts: declining organic visibility, the growing importance of comments and private conversations, LinkedIn as a source for external AI tools, the challenge of building trust in an age of AI slop, and what professionals can still do to become known, remembered, and credible. But I wanted to begin with the question many LinkedIn users, and perhaps a few specialists too, are asking right now. John, what on earth is LinkedIn doing?
Good question to start with. LinkedIn have always said that they're trying to be members first, but I don't really see that it feels like that. So some of their decisions about the way monetization works and so forth, it just makes it feel as though it's increasingly becoming a bit of a pay-to-play platform. One of the things that attracted many of us to create content on LinkedIn is that it was actually quite good for organic reach. If we blow past the old ideas that LinkedIn is just somewhere to pop in occasionally when you're in desperate need of a job, you realize that it's a good place to build your brand, and that's wonderful because you can create content and get all this organic visibility, except that in recent times that's being stifled, or at least it feels as though it is, because people's visibility is going down. There's all these kind of options coming in for people to boost their posts or get visibility only if they're putting some money behind their account in some way or other. So that's frustrating, but I guess it comes back to the fact that we don't really know the mind of LinkedIn. They have always been quite an insular organization. They talk to themselves and not necessarily to their formerly adoring public. So it's a bit hard to understand where they're really going with it. There's been a big push towards AI. Probably we'll get into more of these topics in detail during this chat. But yeah, it's been tough to, as an independent consultant, and you are as well, Lynette. It's been tough to wave the flag for LinkedIn and say this is the place to be. It's also great because of X, Y, and Z. That's been harder in the past sort of 18 months, I would say.
Which takes me to the next question, which is to do with content, given that you've just brought that up. And the organic reach side of things is something that's making us all tear our hair up, I think. And I'm not seeing any change with anything that you can do around that. But LinkedIn is claiming, John, that content consumption is up, and I'm looking at something that says 10% here, while time spent on comments is up 18%. So the idea that we were pitched earlier in the year that we should be putting more effort into engagement on other people's posts rather than producing our own content, which a lot of us have tried to do this year and get our comment levels up, given that we can now see the visibility on those. Do you think that that's really, first of all, still true, that we should be doing more of that, if it ever was? And secondly, what advantage is that really giving us if we can't get our own content visible?
Yeah, I think it is still a good idea to do. It's a natural consequence of something that you hinted at there, which is that LinkedIn now shows the visibility numbers of the comments you leave. So if someone leaves a comment on someone else's post, and then you go back to that comment and you can see it's had 2,000 impressions, for example, that might make you rethink the fact that, yes, if I start putting my ideas somewhere outside of my own feed, then maybe I'll be seen by people who've never heard of me before, and that kind of encourages a cycle of people leaving more comments. So it's no surprise to me that the actual number of commenters, the time spent commenting, has gone up. I do think it's a good thing to do because certainly from my own experience, I've developed a lot of relationships off the back of leaving a hopefully well thought out comment on someone's post, and then someone else sees that thing, maybe interacts with it, or sends me a connection request and says, I saw your comment on XYZ's post, found it really interesting, and then all of a sudden you're in an interesting conversation in the DMs, and that's actually where all the business really gets transacted, or at least it gets started. So I think it's a good idea. The flip side to consider, though, is that because the LinkedIn feed algorithm is focusing so much on topic-based interest, if you leave comments that are good and interesting but not necessarily related to your topic, then you might attract some people into your network, but those people might never then see your content afterwards because you're posting about something that they don't directly care about. So unless you're going to be one of those people who has a strong comment game and then really follows up one-to-one with people in the direct messages so that you keep those relationships going, if you're just doing it to bring in a new audience in the hope that they will see all of your content from there on in, that's not really going to work anymore. So there is a bit of a downside to focusing only on your comments.
I don't see many people only doing that, except if they've always done that. And some people that I know have, from the very beginning, adopted a commenting or engagement strategy rather than posting, or maybe posting only rarely. And they've reported that it's worked really well for them. So I don't see that there's any change for people like that. But I do see that there is a ramification for those of us who also want to have our content seen not just by humans on LinkedIn, but also by AI. And several recent reports about the fact that LinkedIn is one of the most cited sources of answers to questions asked of LLMs, particularly business questions, is a really interesting dilemma, I think, for people on LinkedIn, because you've already mentioned one issue. What if you're commenting on somebody's post that has got nothing to do with what you really want to be known for? And the same with posting. I'm guessing if you're talking about things that aren't really in your lane, then that can be an issue. But I am really interested in your views on how you see AI having an effect. I'm not talking about LinkedIn's internal AI. I'm talking about external here. Are you seeing any evidence at all that AI is picking up LinkedIn posts, is able to see more in terms of our presence and profiles, etc., now than they ever used to? Because of course LinkedIn acts like a moat, keeps a lot of stuff inside, and you can't, external sites can't get at it, the exception being articles and company pages. So are you seeing any evidence at all that AI is able to see more of LinkedIn and our activity there than it ever has?
I think it's seeing it mostly through search engines. If you look at the aggregate studies, they keep coming back to saying things like LinkedIn is either the top most or in the top 3 most cited domains. So when you go and do an AI powered search and that AI tool has some access to the web, which basically all of them do these days, very often those tools will look at anything that comes from LinkedIn as a trusted source of information, and therefore that content ends up being woven into the answers it comes back to you with. I think I saw one bit of research that said that something like 1% or 2% of all AI queries would come back with an answer that involves something drawn from the LinkedIn database, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in relative terms, that's a huge proportion of LinkedIn content being sucked into those AI answers. But as you said, I mean, these AI tools don't have carte blanche to go into the LinkedIn database and simply pull out all of that content. LinkedIn don't permit that. But it seems as though an increasing proportion of what does get published on LinkedIn makes it into the search engines, and that's the thing that the AI tools can read. It used to be the case that only long form content, so articles and newsletters on LinkedIn, only that content really made it into the search engines. But now we're seeing more and more short form content, and very occasionally even comment content can get indexed by the search engines, and therefore is fair game for the AI to use and look up. That doesn't mean you need to change anything about your approach. I mean, if you're writing content or leaving comments, it should still be well thought out, respectful, interesting, helpful. All of those good things should still apply, whether a human is reading it or whether a robot is reading it. The AI is able to understand human language very, very well now. So you don't really need to change your strategy so much, just being cognizant that what you say might go to a bigger sphere than you're expecting. That's all. If one particular thing really blows up, you might find yourself getting quoted all over the place in the future, potentially not just by humans, but also by the AI bots.
That makes a lot of sense. I was talking to a colleague in New York today who does similar work to us, and he was saying that LinkedIn is all over the media there. When anything happens involving a person who is in business, the first platform they go to check anybody out is LinkedIn, which is fine if what they're seeing on LinkedIn is good quality. But you and I both know that there's an awful lot of rubbish on LinkedIn that seems to sometimes regrettably get really good views. So the second part of that question is, does it still matter, do you think, in terms of being found by AI through search engines, whether your content gets good views, or is it really only to do with the quality of the information being presented in a way that AI systems can understand?
Well, if you believe what LinkedIn say, then the focus has to be on quality. And I think actually these tools are advancing in their intelligence. Let's put quotes around the word intelligence. But it's understanding human language better and intent better. And therefore, if you are just saying something that's very hollow, it's probably not going to rank that well with the AI tools. Going back maybe a couple of years, and all of this stuff, that this new generation of AI tools, really, we're talking about something that has been released only in the last 4 or 5 years. So it's all still relatively new, even though the domain is massive and has been going on for ages. But in terms of LLMs and so forth, that stuff is relatively new. If you go back just a couple of years, you could really write absolute garbage and it would tell you that it's the best content that's ever been written. It's very, very sycophantic. Not so much these days. Still an issue, but it's not so much an issue. So I think focusing on the quality is quite important, and hopefully, if that trend continues, then we won't get the people who are writing just froth and nonsense and getting loads and loads of visibility in the future. And I have seen, and LinkedIn's algorithms have been geared somewhat to try and dampen that down. And I have seen less just of that frothy viral content that we did used to see quite a lot on LinkedIn. That has been happening less in my feed. I struggle to talk about these things in black and white terms because all I've got is my own experience of what LinkedIn looks like, which might well be very different to you and to all of your listeners. We all have our own flavor of LinkedIn that is dialed up or down depending on how we behave and what we are interested in. So I can't say categorically that this is happening, but in my experience and in the experience of some other people I've spoken to, we are getting less of that here today, gone tomorrow viral content.
Well, that would be very nice. You and I both have private member groups that are based around LinkedIn, and we have communities that are on LinkedIn. So I want to ask you about the private public side of your LinkedIn presence, if you like, and how you see that changing in a world of AI where trust is being eroded really very dramatically with a lot of AI slop and a general backlash, I think, towards people using AI obviously or demonstrably and putting out stuff that's really not very well done. And so when it comes to creating our own communities, do you think that that's going to become more important now in the age of AI or less, given of course too that you have your Informed podcast nearly at 500 episodes, congratulations, and so you've got a big tribe, if you like, of people who are listeners to that every week. And that is a trust factor as well for you. So you've got people, you're building trust privately, if you like, really, with both your Espresso Plus membership and through the Informed podcast. Will we see more of that, do you think, on the back of this erosion of trust?
I think we're going to have to, if people want to be heard, they need to do it through channels that aren't just the mainstream. You know, if I was publishing only on LinkedIn with visibility going down, as we said at the top of the show, that's a difficult thing to keep going. What you need, and some of us are fortunate that we started building a personal brand some years ago when things were a bit easier to build visibility. You need to try and keep your conversations going as much as possible. So having a private community, as we do, means that we have the we have the facility to have other channels of communicating with our people. So we don't just rely on putting a post out into the ether and hoping it lands. We can also communicate via a private group that only certain people have access to. We can use private email lists. In my case, I've also got a private podcast as well as a public one that you mentioned. So having multiple routes to speak to people means that you've got a chance of keeping the conversation going. That's ultimately what it's about. If you can reach people and keep the conversation going, you open the doors to new business. And in the case of a private paid community, you keep the doors open for that business to be viable. So if you don't do those things, it's very, very hard if you're relying just on a sole public presence. But the problem is, if you were starting, and I'm just imagining a question you haven't quite asked, but I think is at top of mind for me, is if you were starting right now, how on earth would you build a personal brand in an era where AI seems to be covering everything and it's very hard for your voice to be heard at all? It's really hard to build that trust. I started my private community after having built a sort of runway up to it of about 5 years of personal brand and putting public content out for free. That's what built the trust for people to trust me to hop over that walled garden and come into the community. If I was trying to do that now with no personal brand, that's a really, really hard thing to do. So the only thing I can think of as a potential answer there is just not to focus on trying to be the very best at something, but to do things very, very differently from the way other people do them. To just think about how you can genuinely kind of, it's a bit of a cliche, but disrupt the space by just doing things the way that other people don't do them. And that's kind of the only way to stand out. But yes, private community, very, very powerful in terms of keeping relationships going and giving you multiple ways of reaching people.
Well, you did answer the question that was top of mind for me too. So not only relentlessly helpful, but also a mind reader. But I do want to delve into that question a bit more about what you think professionals who are just starting out on LinkedIn or coming back to it, or who have never really put much effort into it, how they really can make any kind of headway now. Because as you say, when you and I first got involved with LinkedIn, publishing was our road to getting known, to getting seen. And I think that has pretty much been closed for a lot of people starting out now. But here in New Zealand particularly, I don't think this is quite so much the case. In Europe, there are a lot of people who are in middle management who set up a LinkedIn profile years ago, done nothing with it, added no content over the period of time, no milestones, haven't updated their profiles, and if you looked at them, you would just go, next.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering how people who are in that position and go, well, I really see LinkedIn as the road to becoming more visible to AI. How do I do that? How do I disrupt? How do I stand out? And what can I actually do? Because clearly posting is not the way to do it nearly so much anymore.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would always tell people to lean on all of the free tools that you have available in LinkedIn. So, a very common question that I'm asked, and I'm sure you're asked this as well, is should I pay for LinkedIn? And invariably, my answer tends to be no to that, because I would say start with doing all of the stuff that's available to you for free. So that includes, writing a good headline, optimizing your profile, adding content to your featured section, writing posts, writing comments, sending direct messages, sending voice notes, sending videos, all these things that people almost never do. The average user never does them. So why not start with doing all of those things? But also think about, if you're coming back to LinkedIn after a very long time where the thing has gathered cobwebs and it's just, you can kind of scrub it and rewrite it in a way that if you were sitting in front of your screen with your ideal client sitting right next to you and you were having a conversation with them, write your profile in a way that you could be pointing at bits of the screen and backing up the argument that you're trying to make to this person by showing them the things that you've done, the relevant achievements, the snappy little bits of stats that show, what your history is, the phrasing that you use in your featured section or in your headline, things that you can actually call on in a conversation that back up the argument that you are the person you're trying to represent. If you think about it in those terms, it becomes a lot easier to make a digital representation of yourself that is actually going to be useful in a potential sales call or to a potential recruiter, if that's what's of interest to you. A lot of people don't see it in those terms, but do it like that, and then try and word it in terms of, if an ideal client wanted to pick up the phone and hire me, or if a recruiter wanted to place me into this position that I'm going for, what kind of things would they be looking for? And also just get to the point as much as possible in trying to state your case. I see a lot of people who write paragraphs of text and the most important thing is at the top of paragraph 5, and you just think no one's ever actually going to get that far. You've really got to punch hard, make an impact quickly, and that's the way to do it. That's the way I would start. Make it relevant, and just optimize using all of the free tools available to you on LinkedIn. If you're at the limit of what you can do with all of those things, by all means, get yourself a gold badge, and perhaps that will help you even further. But the majority of people don't need to worry about that in the first instance.
No, I would agree with that. I find it useful mainly for being able to send personalized connection messages, which I don't do nearly as much anymore as I once did. There've been a few changes in terms of new features this year, not nearly as many as last year, which was only about half of the year before. So what are you seeing this year in terms of changes to LinkedIn that you really like, that you think is going to have some kind of game-changing effect for any of us?
Well, it's a bit of a tricky one because I don't always have all of these features myself. And you know this as well when you're training LinkedIn and someone else in a training session reports something they're seeing and you're thinking, oh, I've never seen that before and I'm meant to be training you. It's because LinkedIn rolls out things at different times. So you don't always have this. So one of those features I'm thinking of right now is the return of the video tab that is coming to the mobile device. Now, I believe that was being tested first in the UK, Australia and Canada. I don't actually have the return of that yet, but it looks as though LinkedIn is trying to make video more important on the platform again. And I don't know whether that's going to work. We will see what the functionality of it is going to be. But yes, if you haven't already got it, your LinkedIn mobile device might soon be having a video tab appearing at the bottom, at which point you'll have a stream of videos that you can watch that are hopefully going to be relevant to you. So that's certainly one to look out for. I'm at the moment testing a new LinkedIn membership package, the all-in-one package, which is relatively new, that is. And that one sits between the Premium and Sales Navigator grades. And it includes one interesting feature, which is that it will serve up 15 new prospects per day for your business based on criteria that you give it to say, I'm interested in working in these areas geographically and kind of notionally. These are my topics of interest, and it will try and serve up people who are active on the platform and who match your criteria, and then you can start conversations with those people. I think that's quite a good feature that they've brought. They're also trying to push boosting, which I don't know how well that's going to work, but the idea that if a post of yours is succeeding, you can put a little bit of money behind it and that will get it enhanced visibility. I've tested that only a couple of times, and sure enough, it gives you a few thousand more impressions, but whether that actually turns into anything significant, not quite sure. And another new feature that I'm intrigued to see how it works. It's brand new, and I don't have this one yet either, unfortunately, but it's the idea of collaborative posts. So I could write something, I could then hit a button to invite you, Linnea, to kind of co-sign that piece of content. And then the moment I publish it, it also goes out on your feed as well as having been co-authored or at least kind of rubber stamped by you. So there's this idea that maybe groups of people who want to collaborate can and not quite flood the feed, but they can turn up with the support of others to get their content more visibility. Only time will tell whether something like that will work. As you know, LinkedIn has long had a problem with things like engagement pods, where people would falsely kind of falsify their numbers a little bit by getting other people to simply support their content without having any interest in that content. But this seems to be a more rigid and hopefully above board way of amplifying other people's voices, and it could be an interesting thing for big content creators to help smaller content creators to level up a bit and be more visible. That would be a lovely kind of mentor student way of doing things. If you say someone with 50,000 followers can pull out someone new from the crowd and say, this person's really smart, they're going to go a long way, and I'm co-signing my content with them because they've got some good ideas. That would be a lovely interpretation of what happened. So these are some new things that are happening, but some of them are so new that I don't yet have them.
Me neither, including the videos. Although I have to say, as regards that, third time lucky would be nice for LinkedIn. We have seen several iterations of videos in the past, John, that haven't really taken off or been as successful as LinkedIn wanted, or certainly we as members wanted. But on the collaborative posts, I do have that feature and have been testing it for the last 2 weeks. And I, like you, see that might have some strategic value. I wasn't quite thinking of it in the same way as you are, but I do feel that there will be some opportunities there for a lot of people people to be able to get their message out to a different audience. The only thing that I'm not seeing on that is LinkedIn boosting it. That's making no difference to organic reach so far as I can tell, which is unusual given that LinkedIn often does that. When they put out a new feature, they do often give it a bit of a hand. So I'm not quite certain whether they haven't quite got round to it yet or they've decided not to do that on this occasion. But yes, I am enjoying the opportunity of learning how to make that one work. It's pretty unglitchy, which is again quite unusual, and seems to be working quite well. So we'll just see where that one takes us. All right, one final question for you. What is one thing that you would be wanting to leave listeners with that might help them in this age of LinkedIn plus AI?
Well, I think anything that demonstrates your humanity is always going to set you apart from your competition, because most people don't have the time or just the energy to invest like that. So much of my business comes from having communications with people away from the feed of LinkedIn. So that's in the comments, but also more importantly in the direct messages. And I use things like voice notes and occasionally even video notes, and also starting things like group chats. I think these are powerful human signals. A robot is not going to go, "Oh, Linnea, I know someone who is also interested in gardening and likes LinkedIn, and you'd be a great match for each other." A robot's not going to set up a kind of organic conversation like that. And a robot's probably not going to be sending you voice notes, or certainly not going to be sending you video notes in a way that's, obviously human. So if you can invest a bit more time in really following up with people and keeping a conversation going, not doing what some people do, which is just sending you a generic birthday message once a year. That's not keeping in touch with people. Keeping in touch with people is actually caring about them, knowing something about them, remembering something about them, and then showing that you're giving them some time. So those signals, those human signals, will make you more memorable. And often I still get feedback from people saying, "Oh, I didn't even know you could do that," or "That's the first voice note I've ever received." So do those things. I suppose I'm fortunate in the point that because I've got something like a public podcast, I can invite people to message me, and then I can put their question on my show, and they know then that there's a pathway of someone who's actually listening to you and giving you feedback. And that's a lovely little thing to try and foster. But yes, just do the things that the robots can't do. That's the way to be noticed and remembered, I think.
In other words, be human on LinkedIn.
It is. I mean, it is a bit of a cliche, but that's our only chance of being remembered, I think. Not everyone can be the very, very best in their field. So you have to do something that's a bit different. If most people are not taking time in the DMs to send human messages, that's the thing that you do need to do.
John, appreciate you spending the time with us today. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Anytime, Linnea. Thank you.
John's thoughtful perspective on where LinkedIn may be heading has reinforced that visibility is not simply about how many people see an individual post. Reach matters, but it's only one part of a much bigger picture. Meaningful visibility is built through the ideas you share, the conversations you contribute to, the relationships you develop, and the body of expertise you make visible over time. It can continue in the comments, move into private conversations, and extend beyond LinkedIn as AI tools increasingly draw on publicly available content to decide whose knowledge appears credible. That makes substance more important, not less. In an environment filled with polished but forgettable content, the advantage belongs to people who bring genuine experience, a recognizable point of view, and a willingness to contribute something useful. AI can support that process, but it cannot replace the insight, judgment, and humanity that give your work meaning. So perhaps the question is no longer simply, how do I get more reach on LinkedIn? The question is, am I making the right expertise visible to the right people in a way that builds recognition and trust? Because purposeful visibility is not about being everywhere. It is about becoming known, remembered, and credible for the work that matters. That's it for this episode of the Visibility Advantage podcast. If today's conversation resonated with you, I'd love it if you shared it with a colleague. If you're ready to understand exactly where your own visibility stands, our Linkability Blueprint is a great first step. You'll find the details in the show notes. And if you haven't already, hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening so you don't miss the next episode. I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.